Okay, so here we have a list of quizzes that we can navigate and pass in the ID of that quiz. Let's use that to fetch the that quiz for that particular ID. Let's look at the implementation on the client side. Here on the in the routing, we had created these two routes. One that lists all the quizzes, right? That retrieves all the quizzes and displays them as a list. And the other one, being able to navigate to a particular quiz. So this is where we left off yesterday. Let's go into the quiz taker. So we had introduced yesterday the capability of parsing the path parameter from the URL, right? And to do that, we introduced activated route. Activated route allowed us to register a listener, right, so that we can be notified whenever the URL changed, whenever the route changed. And this is what we did here in the component in the ng on init. When the component is loaded, the first thing that we do is use the activated route service here that we are injecting, right, so that we can subscribe to one of its many parts, right, many things in the route. The route can have all sorts of things. It can have the path parameter. It can have query parameters. It can have all sorts of things in there, right? The domain can change, and we can get notified on any changes in the route. In particular, we want to be notified if the parameters change. Okay, so this allows us to subscribe. This allows us to grab that parameter and subscribe on any changes, and we'll be notified whenever those parameters change. When we get notified, this function gets called. We provide a callback function that will be invoked whenever the parameters change, and the parameters will be passed to us here as a map. And what we're doing locally is that we're retrieving the ID of the quiz from the map and storing it in a local variable, this.quiz ID, and then rendering on the screen. Okay, and that's what you see here. So what we'd like to be able to do is something more interesting, is actually fetch the quiz for that ID. Okay, and so let's instead of this just copying the quiz ID here, let's make this a little more useful, more interesting. Instead, let's use the service we wrote before to go and fetch a particular quiz. Right? Remember, we wrote a quiz service client. We wrote one yesterday for fetching all the quizzes, but we also got a start on retrieving a particular quiz, giving its ID. Right, this is the URL that we're using to hit the Node.js server, passing the quiz ID at the end, and then parsing the body in the response to return that as a promise. Okay, but we haven't used it yet. So let's use it. So from within the component, let's inject that service so that we can use it. So it will be private service, and it will be the quiz service client. All right, now that we have the quiz service client, we can now use it to go and fetch the quizzes using that function. So let's take a look at that. So instead of this .quiz, what we're going to do is that we're going to declare here an array of quiz. No, not an array. Sorry, this is want to retrieve the quiz, right? So it'll be an empty object for now. We're going to populate that quiz so that we can render it in HTML on the DOM. So what we're going to do is that we're going to take this params quiz ID. We're going to use that as an argument to the service, right? So this quiz ID. So we're going to pass it as an argument. So let's use that. Let's see. Let's replace this with this.service, right? And this will be find quiz by ID. And we're going to pass as argument the params sub quiz ID. Okay? So that's the argument. This is going to return a promise, right? And what we do, and the promise should include should come back with the actual quiz object, right? So let's do that. So this will be the quiz object here. Uh-oh. It's not letting me type. Let's give it a minute. Hello? Okay. All right, so here's the quiz that comes back from the server, and then we're going to populate the local quiz object. So this.quiz is equal to the quiz coming from the server. Make sense? Everybody good? All right, now we have the quiz from the server. Let's populate at least the title. That's all we really have for the quiz object. Let's populate the title of the quiz. Instead of just a quiz ID, instead we'll do maybe H3, and this will be the quiz, and then the title of the quiz. Yes? All right, so let's take a look at that. If we go back, notice that indeed we have the title of the quiz rendered here. If we go back and click on another quiz, say quiz 6 Node.js, notice that indeed we are retrieving the title of that particular quiz. And that was the intent, right? And this works obviously because we had already implemented the service layer on the server, right? Now that we have the at least the title of the quiz, let's focus on more other data that might be interesting in the data model of the quiz. If you remember, a quiz was made up of multiple questions. There were different types of questions. So let's work on that next.